Bear cub, grown up with a human baby. What happened next put everyone in tears. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The small cottage at the edge of Whispering Pines Forest stood peaceful in the early morning light. Raindrops from last night's thunderstorm still clung to the window panes, glistening like tiny jewels in the first rays of dawn. Inside, Lily Morgan gently rocked her 6-month-old daughter, Emma, humming a soft lullaby as the baby's eyes fluttered with sleep. Her husband, Jacob, moved quietly around the kitchen, preparing breakfast while casting loving glances at his family. "Did she sleep through the storm?" Jacob asked, setting a steaming mug of coffee on the table. "Barely stirred," Lily replied, brushing a wisp of blonde hair from Emma's forehead. "Unlike someone who jumped at every thunderclap." She threw a teasing smile at her husband. Jacob chuckled. "I was concerned about the roof leaking, that's all." Their quiet morning routine was interrupted by a strange sound from the garden. Not quite a whimper, not quite a growl. Jacob's brow furrowed as he moved to the window, peering out into their rain-soaked yard. "Lily," he whispered, his voice tight with concern. "Come, look at this." Lily joined him at the window, Emma still cradled in her arms. There, huddled beneath their oak tree, was a small, trembling ball of brown fur. The bear cub couldn't have been more than a few months old, soaked to the bone and looking utterly lost. "Poor thing must have been separated from its mother in the storm," Jacob said, his eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of an adult bear. Emma, now awake, let out a delighted gurgle as she spotted the bear cub. She stretched her tiny arms toward the window, her blue eyes wide with fascination. "Jacob, we can't just leave it out there," Lily said, her maternal instincts extending beyond her own child. "It won't survive on its own." Jacob ran a hand through his dark hair, conflicted. "Lily, it's a wild animal. Its mother could be nearby, and we don't want to get between a mama bear and her cub." As if to challenge his caution, the cub crawled closer to the house, leaving wet paw prints on the flagstone path. It stopped at the bottom step, lifted its head, and let out a pitiful cry that seemed to pierce straight through to Lily's heart. "We'll look for its mother," Lily insisted, "but for now it needs shelter and food." Her tone left no room for argument. Jacob sighed, knowing he couldn't deny his wife when she set her mind to something. "I'll get some towels and call the wildlife service." He opened the back door slowly, expecting the cub to dart away. Instead, it stumbled toward him on unsteady legs. Jacob froze, unsure what to do, but the cub simply collapsed at his feet, too exhausted and hungry to be afraid. Lily laid Emma on her play blanket in the living room and came to help Jacob with the cub. Together, they wrapped it in warm towels and placed it near the fireplace. Emma watched from her blanket, cooing and reaching toward their unusual guest. "Keep her back," Jacob warned, as Lily prepared a mixture of warm milk and honey, the best they could offer until they knew what to feed a bear cub. But Emma was persistent. While her parents were distracted, she rolled, something she had only recently mastered, toward the bear cub. By the time Lily turned around, Emma's tiny hand was already brushing against the cub's damp fur. "Emma!" Lily gasped, lunging forward. But instead of danger, she witnessed something extraordinary. The bear cub, still shivering, gently nuzzled Emma's hand. Emma giggled, a sound like silver bells, and the cub's ears perked up in response. It lifted its head and looked at Emma with deep, soulful eyes that held no threat, only curiosity and what looked remarkably like affection. Jacob stood frozen, the phone halfway to his ear. The wildlife service would tell them to keep the animals separated, to minimize contact until they could take the cub to a rehabilitation center. But watching his daughter and the orphaned cub sharing this moment of innocent connection, he hesitated. "Jacob," Lily whispered, not taking her eyes off the pair, "look at them." Emma was now patting the cub's head with clumsy gentleness, and the cub had stopped shivering. Its eyes were closing contentedly under her touch. "We should still call," Jacob said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We will," Lily assured him, "but maybe we can give them a little time first." Giving them time turned into hours, then days. The Wildlife Service reported no sightings of an adult female bear in the area. Rangers searched the forest, but found no signs of the cub's mother. Each passing day, the bond between Emma and the cub, whom they had started calling Benny, grew stronger. Benny slept on a bed of blankets near Emma's crib. He learned to take bottles of special formula the wildlife rehabilitation expert had provided. He played gentle games of chase with stuffed toys that Emma pushed toward him. "It's just until they find a place for him at the sanctuary," Jacob would say whenever Lily's eyes lingered too long on Benny, whenever she smiled too warmly at the sight of Emma and the cub napping side by side. But deep down, they both knew something extraordinary was happening, something neither of them had the heart to interrupt. One evening, as summer faded into autumn, a knock came at their door. The wildlife officer stood on their porch, clipboard in hand. "We've got space at the bear sanctuary now," he said, his expression sympathetic but professional. "I can take the cub first thing tomorrow." Lily felt her heart sink as she glanced over her shoulder. In the living room, Emma sat on her playmat, clapping her hands as Benny rolled a ball back to her with his nose. Their laughter, human and bear, blended together in perfect harmony. "Just one more night," she whispered, turning back to the officer with tears in her eyes. The man followed her gaze and sighed. "Mrs. Morgan, I understand this is difficult, but that cub will grow. In a year, he'll be strong enough to hurt your daughter by accident. In 2 years..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "We know," Jacob said, placing a supportive hand on Lily's shoulder. "We always knew this day would come." That night, Lily and Jacob took turns sitting in the rocking chair, watching Emma and Benny sleep. The cub was curved protectively around the baby, his fur rising and falling with each breath. Emma's tiny hand rested on his paw. "Are we doing the right thing?" Lily asked, as the first light of dawn crept through the window. Jacob didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was rough with emotion. "I don't know if it's right, but it's necessary." But when the wildlife officer arrived that morning, something unexpected happened. As he approached the house, a commotion erupted from the forest edge. Birds scattered from the trees, and smaller animals darted for cover. Then she appeared, a large female bear, her fur the same rich brown as Benny's. She stood at the tree line, her eyes fixed on the cottage, her powerful body tense but not threatening. "Nobody move," the officer whispered, slowly reaching for his tranquilizer gun. Benny, sensing the presence, rushed to the window. He stood on his hind legs, paws pressed against the glass, and let out a series of soft grunts. The mother bear took a step forward, then another. "She's come for her cub," Lily realized, her heart breaking and healing all at once. The wildlife officer confirmed her suspicion. Bears have incredible maternal instincts. She must have been searching for him all this time. They watched in awe as the mother bear approached the house, caution in every step but determination in her eyes. "We have to let him go," Jacob said softly. Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face. She lifted Emma, who was watching the scene with wide, uncomprehending eyes. "Say goodbye to Benny, sweetheart." The wildlife officer carefully created a safe distance before opening the door. Benny hesitated at the threshold, looking back at the family who had cared for him, at the baby who had become his unlikely friend. Emma waved her tiny hand. "Ba-ba," she said, her first word. Benny took one last look before bounding across the yard to his mother. The reunion was gentle, nuzzles and soft sounds that needed no translation. Together, the bears retreated to the forest, stopping once at the edge of the trees. The mother bear turned, meeting Lily's eyes for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. Then they were gone, swallowed by the ancient forest. Emma cried that night, and the night after. She crawled to the empty blankets where Benny had slept, patting the space as if trying to find him. Lily and Jacob took turns comforting her, their own hearts aching with a bittersweet mixture of loss and joy. "He's with his mother," Lily would whisper. "That's where he belongs." Days turned into weeks. Autumn painted the forest in brilliant reds and golds. Life settled back into a routine that felt both familiar and strangely empty. Then, on a crisp October morning, Jacob called Lily to the window. There, at the edge of their garden, stood the mother bear with Benny at her side. They didn't approach, but they didn't run away either. They simply stood, watching the house, as if checking on old friends. Emma, now able to stand by, holding onto furniture, slapped her palms against the window in excitement. "Ba-ba," she cried. Lily and Jacob glanced at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. They were two families, divided by nature, but connected by something impossible to explain to those who hadn't witnessed it. "They'll come back," Lily said confidently. Jacob nodded. "And we'll be here." As winter approached, the bears' visits became less frequent, but they never stopped completely. Always at a distance, always brief, but always there. A reminder of the summer when their lives had intertwined in the most unexpected way. And Emma, growing faster than her parents could believe, would always run to the window at the first sight of them, calling out to her first and most unusual friend. The village began to whisper about the family at the edge of the forest, about the baby who had befriended a bear, about the bears who visited like old friends. Some called it dangerous. Others called it a miracle. Lily and Jacob simply called it love, the kind that transcends words, that defies explanation, that changes everyone it touches. And this was just the beginning of their story. As Emma grew from a babbling toddler into a curious 4-year-old, the visits from Benny and his mother became a cherished part of their lives. Each appearance was like a special holiday, unpredictable but always celebrated. Sometimes they would come weekly, other times a month might pass without a sighting. But Emma never lost faith that her bear friends would return. The Morgans had expanded their cottage, adding a spacious sunroom that faced the forest. Here, Emma would spend hours drawing pictures of bears, telling stories about Benny's adventures in the woods, and watching for any movement at the tree line. Her bedroom walls were covered with her artwork, crayon sketches of a little girl and a bear playing together beneath a smiling sun. "Do you think Benny remembers playing with me?" Emma asked one evening as Lily tucked her into bed. Her golden curls splayed across the pillow, framing her thoughtful face. "I'm sure he does, sweetheart," Lily replied, smoothing the quilt. "Some bonds can't be forgotten." Jacob, standing in the doorway, added, "That's why they keep coming back to visit." But as time passed, the dynamic of these visits began to change. Benny was growing rapidly, no longer the small, vulnerable cub they had rescued, but a young bear with increasing strength and size. His mother remained cautious, but Benny would sometimes venture closer to the house than she did, his nose lifting to catch Emma's scent on the breeze. One spring morning, as wildflowers dotted the meadow between the cottage and the forest, Emma sat on the sunroom floor, coloring a new picture. Jacob was in the kitchen preparing lunch, and Lily was hanging laundry in the backyard when she spotted them, Benny and his mother emerging from the trees. "Emma," she called softly through the open window, not wanting to startle the bears. "Look who's here." Emma scrambled to the window, her face lighting up. "Benny!" she squealed, pressing her palms against the glass. What happened next would forever change the course of their unusual relationship. While his mother hesitated at the forest edge, Benny ambled directly toward the house with purposeful strides. He was nearly the size of a large dog now, his muscles developing beneath his thick coat. Lily tensed, uncertain of his intentions. The wildlife officer's warnings echoed in her mind. A bear, even a familiar one, was still a wild animal. "Emma, stay inside," she said firmly, moving toward the back door. But Emma had already darted past her, the screen door banging shut as she raced across the yard toward her old friend. "Benny, you came back." "Emma!" Lily's heart leaped to her throat. She broke into a run, calling for Jacob. Benny stopped, rising onto his hind legs as Emma approached, a posture that would terrify most people. The young bear stood nearly 5 feet tall now, dwarfing the little girl who fearlessly ran toward him. Time seemed to slow. Lily saw Jacob burst through the door behind her, heard his shout of alarm. The mother bear made a grunting sound from the tree line, her body tense but not charging. And Emma, sweet Emma, skidded to a halt just feet away from Benny, her little hands outstretched in greeting. "Hi, Benny," she said, as casually as if addressing a schoolmate. "I missed you." Benny dropped to all fours, and for one terrible moment Lily thought he might charge. Instead, he lowered his head and gently, so gently, pressed his nose against Emma's palm, the same way he had when they were both babies. The gesture was so deliberate, so careful, that Lily's panic gave way to awe. Jacob reached them, scooping Emma into his arms. "That's enough, Emma," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Bears need their space." Emma looked confused. "But Benny's my friend." "He's getting bigger now," Jacob explained, backing away slowly. "We need to be more careful." Benny watched them retreat, making no move to follow. His mother called to him with a low grunt, and after a moment's hesitation he returned to her side. Together, they melted back into the forest. That night, after Emma was asleep, Lily and Jacob had a serious conversation. "We need to set clearer boundaries," Jacob insisted, pacing the kitchen. Today was too close. If Benny had felt threatened or playful. "But he didn't," Lily interrupted. "Did you see how gentle he was? How careful? He remembers her, Jacob. That doesn't matter. He's a wild animal growing stronger every day." Jacob ran his hands through his hair in frustration. What happens when he's fully grown? When he weighs 400 pounds and could kill with a single swipe? Lily had no answer. She understood her husband's fears, shared them, even, but she had also witnessed something profound that morning, something that defied conventional wisdom about wild animals. Their discussion was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was unusual to have visitors this late, especially given their remote location. Jacob opened the door to find Sheriff Alan Mercer on their porch, his expression grave. "Evening, Jacob," he said, nodding to Lily. "Sorry to disturb you folks so late, but we've got a situation I thought you should know about." He explained that poachers had been spotted in the regional forest. 2 bears had been killed already, a sow and her yearling cub, for their gallbladders, a prized commodity in certain black markets. I know about your unusual neighbors, the sheriff said carefully. Thought you might want to keep an eye out. Maybe try to discourage them from coming around for a while, for their own safety. After he left, Lily and Jacob stood in silent concern. The thought of Benny and his mother falling victim to poachers was unbearable. We have to warn them somehow, Lily said finally. Jacob looked at her incredulously. Warn them? Lily, they're bears. We can't exactly have a conversation with them. No, but we can keep the poachers away from this part of the forest. Her mind was already working on a plan. We could put up signs, increase our presence, make it too risky for anyone to hunt near our property. It was a start, but both knew it might not be enough. The next day, they explained the situation to Emma in terms she could understand. Bad people were hurting animals in the forest, and they needed to help protect Benny and his mother by keeping them away from danger. Emma's brow furrowed with concern. But how will they know to stay away from the bad people? That's a good question, Jacob admitted. Bears are smart, but they don't understand human dangers the way we do. Emma thought for a moment, then brightened. I could make them a map, with all the safe places marked. Her parents exchanged glances, touched by her innocence but aware of its impracticality. Still, they helped her create a colorful map of the forest, marking their cottage with a big green circle for safe and other areas with red X's for danger. It was an exercise in making Emma feel helpful rather than a real solution, but it comforted her. What they didn't expect was Emma's determination to deliver her map personally. 3 days later, Lily was folding laundry when she realized the house was too quiet. Emma, she called, setting down the basket. Emma, where are you? No response. She checked the sunroom, the bedroom, the backyard. No sign of her daughter. A flutter of panic rose in her chest as she spotted the back gate swinging open. Beyond it lay the path to the forest. Jacob, she screamed, already running toward the trees. She's gone into the forest. They found Emma's small footprints in the mud near the stream, leading deeper into the woods. Clutched in Lily's hand was the map Emma had made. It was missing from her room. She's gone looking for Benny, Lily realized, her voice breaking. To give him the map. Fear, like nothing they'd ever known, gripped them as they followed the trail. The forest was vast, filled with ravines and hidden dangers, not to mention the poachers. A 4-year-old girl wandering alone was at risk for more than just bears. Hours passed as they searched, calling Emma's name until their voices grew hoarse. Park rangers and volunteers from the village joined the effort, forming search parties that combed the increasingly dark forest. Night was falling when they heard shots, 2 sharp cracks that echoed through the trees. Everyone froze, exchanging horrified glances before surging toward the sound. They found the poachers in a small clearing. 2 rough-looking men with rifles slung over their shoulders. At their feet lay a large male bear, not Benny or his mother, but the sight still filled Lily with dread. "Where's my daughter?" Jacob demanded, striding forward despite the ranger's attempts to hold him back. "Have you seen a little girl?" The men looked genuinely confused. "Ain't seen no girl," one said. "Just tracking this male since dawn." While the rangers detained the poachers, the search continued with renewed urgency. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Voices called Emma's name. Lily felt as though her heart might shatter from fear. Then, just when hope was beginning to fade, a familiar sound reached them. A low, rumbling growl followed by a child's giggle. "This way," Lily gasped, breaking into a run. They crashed through the underbrush into another small clearing. There, beneath the spreading branches of an ancient oak tree, sat Emma, completely unharmed and apparently delighted. Beside her, protective and alert, stood Benny's mother, and curled around Emma like a living fur blanket was Benny himself. "Mommy! Daddy! Look!" Emma called cheerfully, seemingly oblivious to the hours of terror she had caused. "I found Benny and gave him the map, and we had a picnic." She held up the remains of a squashed sandwich she must have packed before her adventure. The search party stood frozen in disbelief. The mother bear rose to her full height, positioning herself between the humans and the unlikely pair. She made no aggressive moves, but her message was clear. The child was under her protection. "It's okay," Lily said softly, to both the bear and the armed rangers. "They won't hurt her. They've been watching over her." Slowly, cautiously, Lily and Jacob approached. The mother bear watched them warily but allowed them to come closer. Emma, still nestled against Benny's warm fur, beamed up at them. "Benny understood the map, Mommy," she said proudly. "I showed him all the dangerous places where the bad men might be. And his mommy took us to this special tree to hide." Lily knelt beside her daughter, too overwhelmed for words. The mother bear could have seen Emma as a threat or a meal. Instead, she had protected her, had perhaps even guided her to safety after finding her alone in the forest. "Emma," Jacob said, his voice thick with emotion, "you can never, ever go into the forest alone again. Do you understand? We were so worried." Emma's smile faded. "I'm sorry, Daddy, but Benny needed the map." As the rangers escorted the family home, Lily couldn't shake the image of Emma curled trustingly against the young bear, protected by his mother. Conventional wisdom said it shouldn't be possible, that wild bears should never be trusted with a human child. Yet there was no denying what they had witnessed. That night, after Emma was safely tucked into bed with a firm reminder about the dangers of wandering off, the Morgans received another visitor. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a wildlife biologist specializing in bear behavior, had been called in by the rangers. "What you've described is extraordinary," she said, sipping the tea Lily had offered. "Black bears aren't known to adopt or protect human children. In fact, quite the opposite. We know it sounds impossible," Jacob acknowledged, "if we hadn't seen it ourselves." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward, her expression intense. "Yet your daughter spent hours alone with these bears, and they not only didn't harm her, but actively protected her from potential threats." She shook her head in wonder. "I've studied bears for 20 years, and I've never heard of anything like it." "So, what do we do now?" Lily asked. "The poachers are still out there, and Emma—" She trailed off, unsure how to articulate her conflicted feelings. "I'd like to study this relationship, Doctor," Vasquez said. "With your permission, of course. It could revolutionize our understanding of bear cognition and behavior, and it might help us find a way to protect these particular bears while keeping your daughter safe." The Morgans exchanged glances. They had always known their situation was unusual, but they hadn't considered its scientific implications. If Dr. Vasquez could help protect Benny and his mother while providing a safer framework for Emma's interactions with them. "What exactly would that involve?" Jacob asked cautiously. Dr. Vasquez outlined her proposal, a combination of observation, controlled interactions, and education for both Emma and the bears. "We'd establish clear boundaries, create safer meeting spots away from poaching areas, and teach Emma the proper protocols for wildlife interaction." "And the bears?" Lily asked. "How do you teach boundaries to wild animals?" "Bears are intelligent and adaptable," Dr. Vasquez explained. "They already understand certain boundaries with your family. We'll work with that foundation." She paused, then added more gently, "The alternative would be to relocate them far from here, for everyone's safety. The thought of Benny being taken away again, this time permanently, was devastating to consider. After discussing it privately, the Morgans agreed to Dr. Vasquez's study, with strict conditions to prioritize everyone's safety. What they couldn't have anticipated was how this decision would transform not just their lives, but their entire community. Word spread quickly about the little girl who had been protected by bears, about the unusual study being conducted in their forest. Some villagers were skeptical, even fearful. Others were fascinated. Word spread quickly about the little girl who had been protected by bears, about the unusual study being conducted in their forest. Some villagers were skeptical, even fearful. Others were fascinated. A few, like Sheriff Mercer, became unexpected allies in protecting both the bears and the integrity of Dr. Vasquez's work. Through careful observation and documented interactions, a remarkable picture began to emerge. Benny and his mother weren't just tolerating Emma, they had formed what appeared to be genuine attachments to her. Dr. Vasquez's cameras captured moments of play, of gentle touching, of what could only be described as communication between species that should have been natural enemies. "It's unprecedented, Doctor," Vasquez told them after reviewing months of footage. "The vocalizations, the body language, they've developed their own system of interaction. And the mother bear is actively teaching Benny how to modulate his strength around Emma." As spring turned to summer, Emma's 5th birthday approached. She had only one request for her celebration: "I want Benny to come to my party." Under Dr. Vasquez's supervision, they prepared a special area at the forest edge, close enough to the house for the human guests to observe from a safe distance, but with enough open space for the bears to feel secure. They set out bear-friendly treats alongside the birthday cake, and hung colorful streamers from the lower branches of the trees. No one knew if the bears would actually appear for such an unusual event. Emma insisted they would, with the unshakable faith of a child who believed in magic and impossible friendships. The morning of the birthday party dawned bright and clear. Human guests began to arrive, mostly family friends who had become accustomed to the strange tales of Emma and her bear companions. They gathered on the back porch, a safe distance from the forest edge celebration space as instructed by Dr. Vasquez. Emma, dressed in her favorite blue party dress with bears embroidered along the hem, a special gift from Lily, sat on a blanket in the designated area, arranging and rearranging her stuffed animals as if preparing them to meet their real-life counterparts. Hours passed. The human celebration continued on the porch with cake and games and presents. But Emma remained at her station, her faith unwavering despite the growing concern on the adults' faces. "Should one of us go get her?" Jacob's mother whispered, watching her granddaughter sitting alone at the forest edge. "This isn't healthy, having her wait all day for wild animals." Lily shook her head. "Just give her a little longer." As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Emma's shoulders finally slumped. She gathered her stuffed animals, her expression crestfallen, and turned toward the house. That's when they heard it, a familiar huffing sound from the trees. Everyone froze as Benny emerged from the forest, now nearly the size of his mother, who followed close behind him. They approached cautiously, noses lifted to scent the air filled with unfamiliar humans. Emma's face lit up like the sun breaking through clouds. "You came!" she cried, dropping her toys and rushing to greet them. Dr. Vasquez moved quickly but calmly, positioning herself where she could intervene if necessary. But her concern proved unfounded. Benny stopped a few feet from Emma, lowering his massive head to her level. Emma reached out, placing her small hand on his snout in a gesture that had become their special greeting. His mother hung back, watchful but not aggressive, seeming to understand this was a special occasion. What happened next left even Dr. Vasquez speechless. Benny turned back toward the forest and made a soft grunting noise. From the shadows emerged another bear, smaller than Benny, but definitely not a cub. Its cinnamon-colored fur contrasted with Benny's darker coat. "He brought a friend to my party," Emma said, delighted. Dr. Vasquez's voice was tense but controlled. "That's a young female, about 2 years old, not related to them." She kept her tranquilizer gun ready, unprepared for this development. The new bear approached cautiously, clearly uncertain about the human gathering but following Benny's lead. To everyone's amazement, Benny guided the female through what looked remarkably like introductions, first to Emma, then to his mother. "He's created his own social group," Dr. Vasquez whispered in awe, "and he's introducing Emma as part of it." The birthday party continued with 3 bear guests of honor observing from the forest edge. Emma sat near them, sharing her special day with her unusual friends, while the human guests watched in wonder from the safety of the porch. As dusk fell and the bears retreated into the forest, Dr. Vasquez pulled the Morgans aside. "What we're witnessing is extraordinary," she said, her voice charged with academic excitement. "Bears aren't typically social beyond family units. Bears aren't typically social beyond family units. Benny is exhibiting behavior that contradicts everything we thought we knew." "What does it mean?" Jacob asked. Dr. Vasquez shook her head in wonder. "It means your daughter might be part of something revolutionary. The first human accepted into a bear social structure." This revelation brought new dimensions to their unusual situation and new complications. Dr. Vasquez's study gained attention in academic circles. Other researchers requested access to observe the phenomenon. News outlets caught wind of the story, and suddenly their private arrangement was thrust into the public eye. "The Bear Girl," one headline read. "Child speaks the language of bears," claimed another. Photographers with long-range lenses began appearing at the edge of their property. Wildlife enthusiasts made pilgrimages to the area, hoping to glimpse the famous bears and the little girl who could supposedly communicate with them. The unwanted attention created exactly the dangerous situation they had been trying to avoid. With more humans in the area, the bears grew skittish, their visits becoming less frequent. Poachers, drawn by the publicity, posed an increased threat. "We need to do something," Lily insisted after turning away yet another reporter from their door. "This isn't sustainable for anyone." The situation came to a head when Emma started kindergarten that fall. On her very first day, she was surrounded by curious children, peppering her with questions about her pet bears. Some children were fascinated, others were cruel, calling her Bear Girl in mocking tones or pretending to be scared of her. By the end of the week, Emma was in tears, begging not to return to school. "The kids say I'm weird," she sobbed into Lily's shoulder. "They say bears eat people and I'm making up stories." Jacob and Lily exchanged helpless glances over their daughter's head. They had always known this unusual relationship would create challenges, but they hadn't anticipated how it might isolate Emma from her peers. That weekend, Emma disappeared into the sunroom with her crayons and papers. When she emerged hours later, she handed her parents a carefully drawn picture. It showed their family, Lily, Jacob, and Emma, standing beside Benny, his mother, and the new female bear. Above them all, Emma had written in wobbly letters, "My 2 families." "I want to show this to my class," she announced, "for show and tell, so they understand." Lily and Jacob were torn. On one hand, they wanted to support Emma and help her navigate these social waters. On the other, they worried about encouraging more attention that could endanger the bears. Dr. Vasquez offered a solution. "What if we created an educational program?" she suggested. "Something that teaches children and adults about bear behavior and conservation, using Emma's special relationship as an example while protecting her privacy." The idea took root and blossomed into something larger than any of them had anticipated. With Dr. Vasquez's guidance and the support of local conservation groups, they developed the Bear Connection, an educational initiative that started in Emma's kindergarten class and eventually expanded throughout the region. Through age-appropriate materials, children learned about bear habitats, behaviors, and the importance of conservation. Emma's story, presented anonymously as a child who formed a special bond with a bear family, became a teaching tool rather than a spectacle. The program had an unexpected effect on the community. As understanding replaced fear, locals became invested in protecting their bears. Volunteer patrols monitored the forest for poachers. Fence signs went up, warning against approaching wildlife. The media frenzy gradually subsided as access was restricted, and the story lost its novelty. For Emma, the change was profound. Instead of being the weird bear girl, she became a respected expert, helping her classmates understand the animals she loved. Her teacher, Miss Patterson, invited her to help with special lessons about wildlife, validating her unique knowledge. But the greatest change occurred during the first heavy snowfall of winter, when Emma was running a fever and confined to bed, miserable at missing the first sledding day of the season. Lily brought her soup and medicine, then paused by the window, startled by movement in the snowy yard. There, trudging through the knee-deep snow, came Benny, now a magnificent young adult bear. In his mouth, he carried something that made Lily gasp, a pine cone nearly the size of a football, decorated with frozen berries and twigs. He placed it carefully on the back step, then looked directly at the window where Emma's room was located. After a moment of stillness, he lumbered back toward the forest, leaving large paw prints in the pristine snow. "Emma," Lily called softly, helping her daughter to the window. "Someone brought you a get-well gift." Emma's pale face brightened at the sight of the decorated pine cone. "It's a forest present," she said with absolute certainty. "Benny knows I'm sick." Jacob carefully retrieved the pine cone, bringing it to Emma's bedside after making sure it was free of pests. She cradled it like a treasure, her fever-flushed cheeks regaining some healthy color. "How did he know you were sick?" Jacob asked, partly skeptical, partly wondering. Emma shrugged, as if the answer were obvious. "Because we're connected, Daddy, like Dr. Elena says. We understand each other." That night, after Emma had fallen asleep with the pine cone beside her pillow, Lily found Jacob at the kitchen table, deep in thought. "What is it?" she asked, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I'm wondering where this all leads," he admitted. "Emma is growing up with an attachment to wild bears. What happens when she's a teenager, when she goes to college, when we're old?" He looked up at his wife, genuine concern in his eyes. "Bears live 20 to 30 years in the wild. Benny could be part of her life for decades." Lily sat beside him, taking his hand. "I don't have those answers. I'm not sure anyone does. But I do know that whatever happens, this connection has already changed her, changed all of us, for the better." Jacob squeezed her hand. "I just hope it doesn't prevent her from having a normal life." "Normal is overrated," Lily replied with a small smile. "Our daughter speaks bear. She's never going to be ordinary, Jacob. And maybe that's exactly as it should be." Outside, snow continued to fall, covering Benny's tracks as he made his way back to his winter den, where his mother and the female bear, now his mate, waited. In the quiet of the forest, under a blanket of white, two worlds existed side by side. separate yet connected by a bond that defied explanation. And in her dreams, Emma walked between those worlds, perfectly at home in both. The story of Emma and her bear family was far from over. In fact, it was about to take a turn that no one could have predicted, one that would test the limits of their unusual bond and change their lives forever. 3 years passed, marking a period of relative peace for the unusual extended family. Emma blossomed into a bright, confident 8-year-old with an uncanny understanding of wildlife. Her Bear Connection program had expanded to schools throughout the region, and she had even appeared alongside Dr. Vasquez at a children's wildlife conservation conference, her face carefully obscured in photographs to protect her privacy. Benny had grown into a magnificent adult black bear, weighing over 300 pounds. His mate, whom Emma had named Willow for her preference for resting beneath the willow trees by the stream, had given birth to 2 cubs the previous spring. The mother bear, now showing signs of age with gray fur around her muzzle, had become the matriarch of this small but thriving bear clan. Their visits followed a predictable pattern. They would appear at the forest edge every few weeks, keeping a respectful distance from the house but clearly aware of Emma's presence. Sometimes Emma would read books aloud while sitting on a stump at the yard's edge, and the bears would listen from the shadows of the trees, the cubs tumbling playfully around their parents. Dr. Vasquez continued to document these interactions, publishing papers that challenged conventional understanding of bear cognition and behavior. Her work had attracted funding for a small research station near the Morgan property, where she and a small team of graduate students conducted non-invasive studies of the area's wildlife. Life had found a delicate balance, until the summer when Emma turned 9, when everything changed. It began with the worst drought in living memory. Streams dried to trickles, berries withered on the vine, and forest creatures struggled to find food and water. The Morgan family set up multiple water stations on their property, doing what they could to help the wildlife suffering through the brutal conditions. "The bears will be struggling too," Emma said at dinner one evening, pushing her peas around her plate with unusual solemnity. "Their food sources are all drying up. Dr. Vasquez is monitoring them," Jacob reassured her. "She says they've moved deeper into the forest, where there's still water in the higher streams." Emma nodded, but her worried expression remained. She had grown more perceptive as she aged, more aware of the challenges facing her bear friends. In late July, as the drought intensified, a new threat emerged. A lightning strike in the parched forest sparked a wildfire that quickly spread through the dried underbrush. Within hours, a wall of smoke rose beyond the hills, and ash began to fall like gray snow over the Morgan property. Evacuation orders came shortly before midnight. The Morgans threw essential items into their car as emergency vehicles raced past their driveway, sirens wailing. The fire was approaching from the west, driven by strong winds directly toward their home and the research station. "What about the bears?" Emma cried as Jacob urged her toward the car. "They're in danger too." "Wild animals have instincts for fire," Lily assured her, though her own heart was heavy with concern. "They'll head east toward the river, away from the flames." But Emma wasn't convinced. "Benny's den is on the western ridge," she insisted. "That's where the fire started, and Willow just had cubs. They can't move fast enough." As they pulled away from their home, possibly for the last time, Emma pressed her face against the car window, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched the orange glow intensifying behind the hills. They joined hundreds of other evacuees at the high school gymnasium in the nearest town. Cots were set up in rows, and volunteers distributed water and sandwiches. The Red Cross registered families as they arrived, creating a system to reunite separated members. Through the night, reports trickled in. The fire had jumped the first firebreak. 3 homes on the western ridge were gone. Firefighters were being flown in from neighboring states. The Morgans huddled together on a single cot, Emma finally falling into exhausted sleep between her parents. Dawn brought no relief. The fire had grown exponentially overnight, and new evacuation zones were being established as it advanced. The smell of smoke permeated everything, even inside the gymnasium with its doors and windows sealed. "I need to call Dr. Vasquez," Lily said, stepping outside to use her cell phone in the crowded, noisy space. When she returned, her expression was grave. "The research station is gone," she told Jacob quietly, making sure Emma couldn't hear. They evacuated with their data and equipment, but they had to leave everything else. "And the bears?" Jacob asked. Lily shook her head. "No sign of them. The fire came through that area fast." For 3 days they existed in limbo along with hundreds of other displaced families. Emma grew increasingly withdrawn, refusing to join the activities volunteers organized for the children, instead sitting by the window, staring in the direction of her home. On the 4th day, officials announced that some evacuation zones had been downgraded, allowing certain families to return to their properties to assess damage. The Morgans area was among them. The fire had changed direction before reaching their immediate neighborhood. As they drove back along roads lined with blackened trees, Emma pressed against the window, scanning for any sign of wildlife. The forest that had once been lush and green was now a charred wasteland in many areas, with only scattered patches of untouched trees. Their cottage, miraculously, was still standing. The fire had come within 100 yards of their property line before a shift in the wind had driven it north instead. The garden was covered in ash, and the air still smelled strongly of smoke, but their home was intact. Emma didn't even wait for the car to fully stop before jumping out and running toward the forest edge, calling for Benny. Jacob caught up with her quickly, gripping her shoulder. "Emma, stop," he said firmly. "It's not safe. There could be hot spots still or damaged trees ready to fall." "But Benny might be hurt," she cried, trying to pull away. "Dr. Vasquez and the Forest Service are already checking for injured wildlife," Lily explained as she joined them. "The best thing we can do is stay out of their way and let them work." Reluctantly, Emma allowed herself to be led back to the house. As they cleaned up the ash and checked for damage, she moved mechanically, her mind clearly elsewhere. That night, she barely touched her dinner and went to bed early without complaint, unusual behavior for their typically spirited daughter. Shortly after midnight, Lily woke with a start. Something had triggered her maternal instinct. A sound, perhaps, or just a feeling. She slipped out of bed and went to check on Emma. The bed was empty. Heart racing, Lily searched the house, then woke Jacob. "She's gone," she said, panic rising in her voice. "She's gone looking for them." "She couldn't have," Jacob protested, even as he pulled on his boots. "We talked about this. She knows it's dangerous." But they both knew their daughter's determination when it came to her bear friends. While Jacob called the sheriff and Dr. Vasquez, Lily gathered flashlights and a first aid kit. Within 30 minutes, a search party had assembled. Dr. Vasquez and her team, Sheriff Mercer and 2 deputies and several neighbors who had also returned to their homes. "She'll have headed for the western ridge," Dr. Vasquez said with certainty. "That's where Benny's winter den was located, and she was worried about the cubs." The western ridge was among the worst hit areas. The landscape transformed into an alien terrain of blackened trees and ash-covered ground. Walking through it felt like traversing the surface of the moon, with flashlight beams cutting through lingering smoke. "Emma!" They called her name until their voices grew hoarse, the sound absorbed by the deadened landscape. It was Dr. Vasquez who spotted the first paw print, a clear bear track in a patch of mud created by water dropped by firefighting helicopters. "It's fresh," she said, kneeling to examine it. "And it's from an adult male black bear." "Benny," Lily whispered, hope and fear tangling in her chest. They followed the tracks through the eerie, charred landscape. The bear prints led them deeper into the burned forest, past fallen trees and still smoking stumps. The devastation was heartbreaking. Wildlife habitats destroyed. Ancient trees reduced to blackened skeletons against the night sky. "The tracks are getting fresher," Dr. Vasquez said after nearly an hour of careful tracking. "And look, there are smaller prints now, too." She was right. Alongside the large adult prints were smaller tracks. A second adult bear and what appeared to be cub prints. "Willow and the cubs," Lily breathed. "They survived." Hope surged through the search party. If the bears had made it through the fire, perhaps Emma had found them. Perhaps she was safe. The tracks led them to a small ravine that had somehow been spared the worst of the blaze. A narrow stream still trickled at its bottom, and patches of green remained among the surrounding devastation. It was a pocket of life in the midst of destruction. Sheriff Mercer raised his hand for silence, then pointed. There, beside the stream, was Emma. Filthy with soot, her nightgown torn and her hair tangled, but unmistakably alive. She was kneeling beside something, her small form hunched over in concentration. "Emma!" Lily called, relief flooding her voice. Emma looked up, startled. "Mom, Dad, over here, Benny's hurt." As they scrambled down the ravine, the full scene came into view. Benny lay on his side by the water, his massive form unnaturally still. One of his paws was badly burned, and patches of his fur were singed away, revealing raw skin beneath. Nearby, Willow watched warily, her cubs huddled against her, their round eyes reflecting the flashlight beams. "I found them trying to reach the water," Emma explained as her parents embraced her, tears streaming down their faces. "Benny was protecting them from the fire, but he got hurt. He can't walk right." Dr. Vasquez approached cautiously, her experienced gaze assessing the injured bear. "Third-degree burns on his right forepaw," she reported. "Some singing along his flank, possible smoke inhalation." She looked at Emma with newfound respect. "You led him to water. Good thinking." "I didn't lead him," Emma said simply. "He knew where to go. I just helped." What happened next would be debated in wildlife biology circles for years to come. Benny, despite his injuries and natural instinct to avoid humans when vulnerable, allowed Dr. Vasquez to approach and examine him. He watched her with pained but trusting eyes, occasionally glancing at Emma as if for reassurance. "He needs medical attention," Dr. Vasquez said finally. "Burns like these will become infected without treatment." "Can you help him here?" Jacob asked, still holding Emma tightly. Dr. Vasquez shook her head. "We need to get him to a wildlife medical facility. But moving a wild bear of this size..." She trailed off, the challenges evident. "He'll go where Emma goes," Lily said with sudden certainty. "He trusts her." It was a desperate plan born of desperate circumstances. With the Forest Service's emergency wildlife transport still hours away, and Benny's condition deteriorating, they decided to try something unprecedented. Emma would guide Benny to walk the mile back to the road where they could meet the transport. "It's too dangerous," Sheriff Mercer protested. "That bear is injured and in pain. Wild animals are most unpredictable when they're hurting." "Benny's not just a wild animal," Emma insisted, her young voice steady with conviction. "He's my friend, and he needs our help." Against all conventional wisdom, they proceeded with the plan. Emma walked slightly ahead of Benny, encouraging him with soft words and occasional backward glances. The injured bear followed, limping heavily but determined, with Willow and the cubs trailing at a distance. The humans formed a wide circle around this unusual procession, flashlights illuminating the safest path through the treacherous terrain. Progress was agonizingly slow. Benny would stop frequently, his breathing labored, his injured paw held clear of the ground. Each time, Emma would wait patiently, sometimes returning to speak to him in low tones before leading onward again. "What is she saying to him?" one of the deputies whispered in awe. "I'm not sure she's really talking to him," Dr. Vasquez replied, watching the scene with professional fascination. "It's more like they're communicating on a level we don't fully understand." After what seemed an eternity, they reached the road where the wildlife transport waited. A specially equipped truck with a bear-sized cage reinforced for safety. Now came the greatest challenge, convincing an injured wild bear to enter a cage. The team from the Wildlife Center looked skeptical when Dr. Vasquez explained their plan to have Emma guide Benny into the transport. "That's not how we usually do this," the lead veterinarian said doubtfully. "Normally, we'd tranquilize him first." "Tranquilizers could be risky with his compromised respiration from smoke inhalation," Dr. Vasquez countered. "Let's try it Emma's way first." With the transport ramp lowered and the cage door open, Emma approached Benny once more. The gathering of humans, wildlife experts, Forest Service personnel, police, and family watched in tense silence as the 9-year-old girl stood eye to eye with the massive bear. "You need to go with these people now," she told him, her voice carrying clearly in the night air. "They'll make your paw better. I promise I'll come see you." Benny looked at the transport, then back at Emma. He seemed to understand the choice before him: trust these unknown humans and their confining cage, or remain in the forest with his injuries worsening. Slowly, painfully, he limped up the ramp and into the cage. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. Not a single wildlife expert present had ever seen anything like it. The cage door was secured, and preparations made for departure. As the transport prepared to leave, Emma pressed her palm against the cage bars in their familiar greeting gesture. Benny responded in kind, touching his nose to her hand in a moment of connection that brought tears to many eyes. "I'll come as soon as they let me," Emma promised. "Be brave." Willow and the cubs watched from the forest edge as the transport pulled away, carrying Benny to the Wildlife Medical Center 3 hours south. Only when the taillights had disappeared did they melt back into the darkness of the recovering forest. The story of Emma and the injured bear spread quickly, first through the emergency response community, then to local media, and finally to national news outlets. By the time Emma was allowed to visit Benny at the Wildlife Center 3 days later, camera crews had gathered outside, hoping for a glimpse of the Bear Whisperer, as one headline had dubbed her. Inside the treatment facility, Benny was recovering in a spacious enclosure adapted for his needs. His burns had been treated, antibiotics administered, and his vital signs were improving. The staff reported with amazement that he had been a model patient, calm and cooperative in a way uncharacteristic of wild bears. "He's waiting for you," the lead veterinarian told Emma as she guided the family to the observation area. "He perks up every time the door opens like he's expecting someone special." Sure enough, when Benny spotted Emma through the reinforced glass, he immediately approached, pressing his massive head against the barrier that separated them. Emma placed her hand against the glass, and Benny aligned his nose with it, their usual greeting, adapted to their new circumstances. His burns are healing well, the veterinarian explained, but he'll need several more weeks of treatment. And there's another concern. She hesitated, looking at Jacob and Lily. His right paw may never regain full function. He'll likely have a permanent limp. What does that mean for his future? Jacob asked, already suspecting the answer. A wild bear needs 4 good paws to survive, the veterinarian said gently. To climb, to dig for food, to defend territory with a permanent disability. She left the implication hanging. You mean he can't go back to the forest? Emma asked, her voice small. It wouldn't be fair to him, the veterinarian confirmed. He'd struggle to survive, even with his family group to help. Predators would target him as the weakest link. So, what happens to him? Lily asked, placing a protective arm around Emma's shoulders. Normally, a bear that can't return to the wild would be placed in a sanctuary or zoo, the veterinarian explained. Given Benny's unique history and abilities, we've already had offers from several facilities. Emma's face crumpled. But that would separate him from Willow and the cubs forever. And from me. The reality of the situation settled over them like a heavy blanket. Benny had survived the fire, but his life would never be the same. The freedom of the forest was no longer an option for him. As they left the medical center that day, pushing through reporters shouting questions about Emma's remarkable bond with the bear, a seed of an idea began to form in Jacob's mind. It was audacious, unprecedented, perhaps even impossible, but watching his daughter's tear-streaked face as she waved goodbye to her oldest friend, he knew they had to try something extraordinary. That evening, after Emma had finally fallen asleep, Jacob shared his idea with Lily. What if we turned our property into a bear sanctuary? Lily stared at him. A sanctuary? For Benny? For all of them, Jacob clarified. Benny, Willow, the cubs, even the old mother bear if she's still alive. We have 20 acres, most of it forested, with proper fencing and facilities. That would cost a fortune, Lily pointed out, though there was a spark of interest in her eyes. And the permits alone. The publicity from all this has created possibilities, Jacob said. Dr. Vasquez mentioned that several conservation groups have reached out, offering resources for Benny's care. And think about it. A research sanctuary dedicated to studying this unique bear family and their cognitive abilities. It could advance our understanding of animal intelligence. They stayed up late into the night, researching regulations, sketching plans, calculating costs. By morning, what had seemed like an impossible dream had begun to take shape as a challenging but potentially achievable plan. When they presented the idea to Dr. Vasquez the next day, her initial skepticism quickly gave way to excitement. This could be revolutionary, she said, paging through their rough proposal. A controlled environment where the bears could live semi-wild lives while allowing for ethical research, and Emma's connection with them provides an opportunity to study interspecies communication that simply doesn't exist anywhere else. The real challenge came when they approached county officials with their plan. Converting residential property into a wildlife sanctuary required zoning changes, environmental impact studies, and extensive safety protocols. Neighbors had concerns about having bears, even familiar ones, permanently housed so close to residential areas. It's just not feasible, the county commissioner told them after their initial presentation. The liability alone would be prohibitive. But Emma, listening quietly from the back of the room, stood up. In her hand was a thick stack of papers. "These are signatures," she said, her voice clear despite her nervousness. 2,000 people from our town and all over the country who support saving Benny and his family. They all signed after watching the video. The video she referred to had been taken by one of Dr. Vasquez's graduate students on the night of the rescue. Shaky footage of Emma guiding the injured bear through the burned forest, their trust in each other evident in every careful step. Posted online, it had gone viral overnight, touching hearts worldwide. The commissioner accepted the petition with a thoughtful expression. "I'll bring this to the full board for consideration," he promised. What followed was a crash course in activism, bureaucracy, and the power of public opinion. The Morgans found themselves at the center of a movement that transcended local politics. Wildlife conservation organizations offered funding and expertise. Celebrities tweeted their support. A famous architect volunteered to design bear-friendly facilities that would blend seamlessly into the landscape. Through it all, Emma visited Benny regularly as he recovered. His burns healed, though, as predicted, his right paw remained partially disabled. He would indeed have a permanent limp, a constant reminder of his sacrifice to protect his family during the fire. 3 months after the fire, the county board voted unanimously to approve the sanctuary proposal, with strict conditions regarding safety and oversight. Construction began immediately, funded by a combination of grants, donations, and a substantial contribution from a wealthy conservationist who had been moved by Emma and Benny's story. By spring, as new growth began to reclaim the burned areas of the forest, the sanctuary was ready. A carefully designed 10-acre enclosure encompassed a section of the stream, stands of trees that had survived the fire, and natural denning areas enhanced for comfort and accessibility. High, specially engineered fencing would keep the bears safely contained while allowing them to live as naturally as possible. The day of Benny's homecoming dawned bright and clear. A small crowd gathered at the Morgan property. Family, friends, researchers, and officials who had helped make the sanctuary possible. A transport from the Wildlife Center arrived, carrying the bear who had become a symbol of resilience and connection. Emma waited at the gate of the newly constructed sanctuary area, her parents beside her. When the transport door opened and Benny emerged, blinking in the sunlight, a hush fell over the gathering. The bear had fully grown during his months of treatment. A magnificent animal despite his limp, he surveyed his surroundings cautiously, nostrils flaring as he processed the familiar sense of home. Then his gaze found Emma, and everything else seemed to fade away. He moved toward her with purpose, his distinctive gait neither diminishing his power nor his grace. Emma stepped forward to meet him, ignoring the murmured concerns of the wildlife handlers. Their reunion brought tears to many eyes. Benny lowered his massive head to Emma's level, and she placed her palm gently against his nose, their special greeting, performed hundreds of times over the years. For a moment, they simply regarded each other, girl and bear, connected by a bond that defied explanation. Then Emma turned and led Benny through the gate into his new home, neither fully wild nor truly captive, but somewhere in between. A place created just for him and his unusual family. The true surprise came that evening. As dusk fell and the visitors departed, movement at the forest edge caught Lily's attention. There, at the boundary where wild forest met sanctuary fence, stood Willow with her cubs, now yearlings nearly half her size. Beside her was the aging mother bear, her muzzle now almost entirely gray, but her posture still strong and dignified. They had returned, drawn by some instinct or memory to the place where Benny had been taken. The family watched in wonder as Benny approached the fence from the inside, meeting his family at the barrier that now separated them. What happened next was both heartbreaking and affirming. Willow paced the perimeter, clearly distressed by the fence between her and her mate. The cubs, sensing their mother's agitation, grew restless. The reunion should have been joyous, but the barrier made it bittersweet. "They want to be together," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. "All of them." Jacob and Lily exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. They had built the sanctuary for Benny, thinking his family would continue their lives in the wild. But now, faced with the reality of this bear family's bonds, they understood that their plan was incomplete. "Dr. Vasquez," Jacob called to the researcher, who was documenting the interaction. "How difficult would it be to expand the sanctuary and bring Willow and the others in?" Dr. Vasquez considered the question thoughtfully. Capturing wild bears is challenging and potentially traumatic for them. But in this case, she gestured to where Willow was still pacing, unwilling to leave despite her natural caution around humans. They might come willingly, for Benny's sake. Over the next week, they prepared for an unprecedented attempt, the voluntary relocation of wild bears into the sanctuary. The gate was prepared, a corridor of temporary fencing created to guide the bears safely from forest to sanctuary if they chose to enter. Emma spent hours with Benny near the fence line, allowing Willow and the others to grow accustomed to the sanctuary's scents and sounds. "It has to be their choice," Dr. Vasquez insisted. "Forced relocation would destroy the trust we've built." On a moonlit night in late spring, with only the Morgan family and Dr. Vasquez present to minimize stress on the bears, they opened the gate. Benny positioned himself just inside the sanctuary, while Emma stood at a safe distance, watching with bated breath. Hours passed with no movement from the forest. Midnight came and went. Emma refused to leave her vigil, though her eyes grew heavy with exhaustion. "They'll come," she insisted. "They need to be together." At the first hint of dawn, shadows moved at the forest edge. Willow appeared first, cautious but determined, her cubs close behind. The old mother bear followed at a distance, more wary than the others. Benny called to them, a series of low huffs and grunts that carried clearly in the still morning air. Willow responded, edging closer to the open gate but still hesitating at the threshold between wild freedom and protected safety. Then Emma did something that made Dr. Vasquez gasp. She stepped forward, placing herself between Benny and his family, directly in the gateway. If Willow chose to charge through, Emma would be in immediate danger. "Emma, no!" Lily cried, starting forward, but Dr. Vasquez held her back. "Wait," the researcher said tensely. "Watch what's happening." Emma stood perfectly still as the Willow approached the gate. The female bear stopped just short of the opening, her dark eyes fixed on the human child. There was a moment of breathless tension as two females, one human, one bear, regarded each other across the boundary of two worlds. Then Emma spoke, her voice soft but clear in the dawn light. "He needs you," she said simply, "and you need him." Willow tilted her head as if considering these words. She looked past Emma to where Benny waited, then back at her cubs and the forest behind her. Freedom versus family, a choice no wild animal should have to make. With deliberate slowness, Willow stepped through the gate, her cubs following close behind. The old mother bear hesitated longer, but eventually she too crossed the threshold. As the last bear entered, Dr. Vasquez quietly closed the gate, securing it without fanfare. The bear family's reunion was a sight the witnesses would never forget. Benny and Willow greeted each other with gentle huffs and touches, while the cubs gamboled around them, already exploring their new territory. The old mother bear held back initially, but eventually approached to touch noses with the son she had once feared lost. "They chose each other, Doctor," Vasquez said quietly, documenting the historic moment. "Over freedom, over instinct, they chose family." News of the bear family's voluntary relocation to the sanctuary spread quickly through scientific channels. then to the media. Experts debated what it meant for our understanding of bear cognition, social structures, and decision-making. Some remained skeptical, attributing the behavior to food conditioning or abnormal imprinting. Others saw it as evidence of emotional complexity previously unrecognized in bears. For the Morgan family, the significance was both simpler and more profound. The bears had made a choice that echoed the one Jacob and Lily had made years ago when they first allowed a bear cub to share space with their infant daughter, choosing connection over convention, compassion over caution. The sanctuary became not just a haven for the bear family, but a center for groundbreaking research. Dr. Vasquez established a permanent field station on the property, bringing in carefully selected researchers to study the bears' behavior, communication, and social dynamics. Emma participated enthusiastically in the research, serving as what Dr. Vasquez termed a cultural interpreter between species. As Emma entered her teen years, her role evolved. The Bear Girl nickname that had once been used to tease her was now a title of respect among her peers. Schools throughout the region participated in the educational programs she helped develop. Her insights into bear behavior had saved lives during subsequent wildfire seasons, as she helped the wildlife officials predict evacuation routes for forest animals. The most remarkable developments occurred in the realm of communication. Working with linguists and animal cognition experts, Emma and Dr. Vasquez began mapping what appeared to be a rudimentary language system used by the bears, a combination of vocalizations, body postures, and contextual cues that conveyed specific meanings. It's not language as we typically define it, Dr. Vasquez explained during a presentation at a prestigious scientific conference where 14-year-old Emma was a featured speaker. But it is a complex communication system with consistent patterns and apparent intentionality. Emma demonstrated by producing a series of sounds that mimicked bear vocalizations. On the video screen behind her, footage showed Benny responding to these sounds by performing specific actions, moving to particular locations, retrieving objects, or alerting the other bears. "I didn't teach him these associations," Emma explained to the rapt audience. "We discovered them together through years of interaction. Bears already have these communication capabilities. Humans just haven't been listening properly." The sanctuary's success led to an unexpected development when Emma was 15. A young male bear, unrelated to their group, began appearing at the perimeter fence. He showed no fear of humans and seemed particularly interested in the female cubs, now approaching maturity. "He's courting them," Dr. Vasquez observed with academic interest. This raises fascinating questions about how bears select mates and form new family groups. The arrival of this outsider bear, whom Emma named Ranger for his habit of patrolling the fence line, presented a new dilemma. Introducing an unknown male into the sanctuary could disrupt the established group dynamics. Leaving him outside could lead to stress for the maturing female cubs who showed equal interest in the newcomer. "This is how it would happen in the wild," Jacob noted, as they observed Ranger making another circuit of the fence. Young females would meet males from outside their family group. The decision was complex, balancing natural bear behavior against the artificial constraints of the sanctuary. After much discussion and observation, they decided to create an adjacent enclosure for Ranger, with a controlled access point between the two areas that could be opened when appropriate. To everyone's surprise, it was Benny who ultimately determined how this new arrangement would work. After initial posturing and territorial displays through the fence, the older male seemed to accept Ranger's presence. When the connecting gate was finally opened, Benny escorted his now mature daughters to meet the young male, maintaining a watchful presence during the interaction but not preventing it. "He's facilitating the introduction, Doctor," Vasquez marveled, documenting the behavior. This level of social complexity in bears is unprecedented in scientific literature. One of Benny's daughters eventually chose to spend more time in Ranger's enclosure, eventually staying there permanently. The sanctuary expanded again to accommodate the new pair, creating a connected but separate territory for what researchers started calling the second generation. These developments coincided with changes in Emma's own life. As college approached, she faced difficult choices about her future. Universities across the country had expressed interest in the girl who had revolutionized understanding of bear cognition, offering scholarships for studies in wildlife biology, animal behavior, or conservation. "I don't know if I can leave them," she confessed to her parents one evening, sitting on the observation deck overlooking the sanctuary where the bears were preparing for their winter semi-hibernation. "They've been part of my life since before I can remember." "The bears or the research?" Jacob asked gently. Emma considered the question. "Both, I guess. This work is important. We're just beginning to understand what they're capable of, how they think and feel and communicate. But also..." She watched as Benny approached the observation area, acknowledging her presence with a familiar motion before continuing his evening routine. "They're family." "Family doesn't have to mean staying in one place forever," Lily reminded her. "You can go explore the world, learn new things, and bring that knowledge back. The bears will be here." Dr. Vasquez had offered a compromise. Emma could attend the nearby state university while maintaining her connection to the sanctuary research. It was a practical solution that would allow her to pursue higher education without completely severing her ties to the bear family. But as her senior year of high school progressed, Emma found herself increasingly drawn to wider questions of animal cognition and conservation. Her experiences with the bears had opened her eyes to the broader issues facing wildlife in a changing world. "I think," she said finally, on the night after receiving acceptance letters from multiple universities, "that what Benny taught me about family can apply to all of us. He showed me that family can expand and change and grow in unexpected ways. Maybe it's time for me to do the same." Her decision to attend a prestigious university across the country was met with mixed emotions from everyone, including, it seemed, the bears. During her last weeks at home, Benny and the others spent more time near the observation areas when she was present, as if sensing the impending separation. On the day before her departure, Emma spent hours at the sanctuary, moving from one observation point to another as the bears followed her progress. It was Willow who approached her at the fence that evening, the female who had once been so cautious around humans now comfortable enough to accept a gentle touch through the barrier. "Take care of him," Emma whispered, tears tracking down her cheeks. "I'll be back." The video call feature on her laptop became Emma's lifeline to the sanctuary during her freshman year. Her parents would carry the computer around the observation points, allowing her to see the bears in their daily activities. Dr. Vasquez kept her involved in the ongoing research, sending data for Emma to analyze and including her name on the papers they published. But college brought new perspectives and opportunities. Emma found herself drawn to comparative cognition, the study of intelligence and awareness across species. Her unique experience with the bears made her contributions to class discussions invaluable, and she soon became involved in research projects studying other intelligent species, from dolphins to elephants. "The communication patterns we're observing in elephants have similarities to what we documented with Benny's family," she told her parents excitedly during one video call. "It's like there are universal elements to how intelligent social species express themselves." During her sophomore year, Emma was offered an opportunity to join a research expedition studying marine mammal communication in Alaska. It meant missing her usual summer return to the sanctuary, a sacrifice that weighed heavily on her. "Go," her father encouraged. "Benny would want you to expand your understanding." "Bears don't want things the way humans do," Emma countered, but they both knew it wasn't entirely true. The bears had demonstrated wants, preferences, and choices that had surprised researchers repeatedly over the years. The decision was made easier when Dr. Vasquez reported that Benny had developed a new habit. He would frequently bring objects to the observation window. Interesting stones, unusual branches, once even a perfectly intact robin's egg, and place them carefully where researchers could see them. "It's almost like he's sharing discoveries," Dr. Vasquez explained. "And he does it most often when we're on video calls with you. I think he's communicating with you in the only way available to him now." This revelation settled something in Emma's heart. The connection hadn't been severed by distance. It had evolved just as she had, just as the bears had over the years. She accepted the Alaska position, throwing herself into the new research while maintaining her ties to the sanctuary. During her junior year, she began developing a comparative framework for understanding communication across highly intelligent species, drawing on her experiences with bears, dolphins, and the emerging research on elephant communication. It was during this period that the most unexpected development occurred back at the sanctuary. Ranger and Benny's daughter had produced cubs, the first birth within the protected space. This third generation, born neither fully wild nor fully captive, represented something entirely new in the study of bear behavior. "They have no fear of humans at all," Dr. Vasquez reported, showing Emma footage of the curious cubs approaching researchers at the observation windows. "But they're still unmistakably bears in their behavior and instincts." The implications were both exciting and concerning. These cubs, growing up with regular human contact and born to parents who themselves had unusual relationships with humans, might develop capabilities no one could predict. The research potential was enormous, but so were the ethical considerations.